It was meant to be a quiet weekend, the kind of escape I needed after a rough couple of weeks at work. My cabin, deep in the woods of Montana, is my sanctuary, far from the noise, far from cell signals, far from people. I go there to disconnect, to breathe, and sometimes to hunt. That Friday, I packed up my truck with supplies, loaded my rifle, and drove for hours into the wilderness. There was something calming about the steady rhythm of tires on gravel roads, the way the trees stretched endlessly on either side, untouched and ancient. I didn't know then what was going to happen. I couldn't have imagined that someone else had plans for that same weekend. The air was crisp when I arrived. Pine needles crunched under my boots. The wind carried a hint of snow that hadn't fallen yet. The cabin looked exactly how I left it, wood stacked neatly by the porch, door locked, everything in place. I dropped my gear inside, lit a fire, and settled in. As always, I set my trail cams around the perimeter, not just to catch deer or bears, but to give me peace of mind. You never really expect to see anything until you do. That night, I cooked some beans over the fire and turned in early. Morning came with a chill. I grabbed my rifle, put on my gear, and headed out before the sun had fully risen. I was tracking a large buck I'd seen signs of last time I was up here. I moved slowly, following prints and signs, listening closely. The forest was alive but quiet in a way that lets you hear your own thoughts. Hours passed. I didn't see the buck, but I wasn't in a rush. Time moves differently out there. By early afternoon started the hike back, but something felt off. As I approached the cabin from the ridge, I stopped. Smoke, not from my chimney, from the fire pit outside. I hadn't lit it. My cabin door, it was open, wide open. My chest tightened. I crouched down behind a tree and stayed still, watching. I didn't see anyone. No movement, just the slow curl of smoke from the pit. I moved closer, slowly, carefully. My heart pounded louder than my footsteps. I peeked around the side, and that's when I saw her. Woman, blonde hair, maybe in her late 40s or early 50s, dressed like she was going to the mall, not like someone hiking through the woods. She was lounging on my porch chair, holding a cup of something, when completely at home. She had even taken one of my flannel blankets and draped it around herself like it was hers. I didn't recognize her. I didn't know what to say. My first instinct was to walk up and demand what the hell she was doing, but something stopped me. Instead, I quietly backed away and looped around the other side, where I had another trail cam facing the door. I wanted proof. If she was going to do something illegal, I wanted it on record. I watched from a distance as she stood up, went inside, and started moving around. I could hear the clatter of dishes, a drawer opening. Was she making herself lunch? Using my kitchen? I felt a mix of anger, confusion, and disbelief. Who just walks into someone's remote cabin and makes themselves at home? I decided to stay hidden a little longer. Maybe she'd leave. Maybe this was a mistake. But the longer I watched, the more it was clear this woman had no intention of leaving. After about an hour, she came back out with a sandwich in one hand and my binoculars in the other. She scanned the woods like she owned the place. Then, something even more shocking happened. She pulled out her phone and started taking selfies on my porch, with my gear in the background, as if this was her vacation spot. She even arranged my hunting gear neatly for a better picture. I stepped back behind a tree, trying to process it all. Who was she? Why was she here? There were no cars parked on the dirt trail leading in, which meant she either hiked here or got dropped off. Either way, she didn't stumble on my cabin by accident. She came here deliberately. Eventually, I moved far enough away to reach a cell signal and called the sheriff. He told me to stay hidden, stay calm, and they'd send someone up, but it could take a couple of hours to reach me. So I waited. The sky began to turn orange with the setting sun. I stayed crouched in the woods, not far from my own home, watching a stranger walk in and out of it like it was hers. That's when she found the upstairs loft. I could hear the creak of the stairs. Then light from the window upstairs came on. I gritted my teeth. That's where I keep some of my personal stuff. Family photos. My dad's old hunting rifle. She had no right to be there. My patience was wearing thin, but I held on. I didn't want to scare her into running. I needed the sheriff to get here. I needed this to be handled legally. The sun was almost gone now. Darkness was settling in. I crept back around and checked the trail cam feed on my phone. I couldn't believe what I saw. She had arrived hours earlier. The camera had caught her walking up to the porch, pulling out what looked like a credit card, and slipping it between the door and frame. My lock wasn't broken, she picked it. Then she walked right in, smiling like she'd won something. Scrolled further, and saw another clip her inside, looking through my things, pulling out a pair of boots, trying them on, laughing. Like this was some twisted vacation for her. My jaw clenched tighter with every clip. It wasn't just trespassing, it was full-on invasion. But then came the video that made my blood go cold. One of the cams near the back window caught her. On the phone. The audio was faint, but I could hear enough. She was telling someone on the other end that she found the perfect little spot and that no one would be here for days. She wasn't just squatting, she was planning to stay, and that's when headlights flickered through the trees. The sheriff had arrived. I kept staring at the footage like my eyes were playing tricks on me. But no, it was all real. There she was, walking around like she owned the place. Her oversized sunglasses, bright pink jogging suit, and that ridiculous oversized purse swinging, like she was shopping at a mall instead of sneaking into a stranger's remote cabin. And worse, she didn't just poke her head in and leave. Nope, she settled in. The first few minutes showed her inspecting the furniture, checking the cabinets, opening the fridge. She even poured herself a glass of water like it was her own kitchen. I felt a strange mix of anger and disbelief. I mean, who does that? Who walks into someone's private cabin in the middle of the woods and acts like it's some Airbnb? As the footage went on, I noticed more disturbing things. She wasn't just exploring. She was looking through drawers, flipping through my notebooks, even opened my lock supply trunk with the screwdriver she pulled from her purse. That trunk had my hunting gear, knives, flashlights, maps, and even my extra ammo. It was clearly marked private, but that didn't stop her. I could feel my blood pressure rise. But I also felt nervous. Why was she there? What was she looking for? This wasn't some harmless mistake. She was trespassing, and she was digging through personal things. It was almost like she had a purpose. The footage showed her putting on one of my flannel jackets and sitting in my recliner, flipping through my survival guides like she was planning a camping trip. She stayed for over 2 hours, just walking around, using my stuff, eating some of my food, and even lighting a candle in the corner like it was a romantic night in. And just before leaving, she did something that chilled me to the core. She walked up to the trail cam on the bookshelf, leaned forward, and whispered something. The audio was grainy, but I could make out the words, "See you soon." That was no accident. She knew the camera was there. My heart was racing. I immediately locked up the cabin, packed my things, and drove back to town. I went straight to the sheriff's office and handed over the footage. The sheriff watched it with a furrowed brow, occasionally shaking his head. "Well," he said, after a long silence, "that's definitely trespassing. We'll see if we can ID her." "You didn't recognize her at all?" "No," I said. "Never seen her before." "She knew about the cabin," he said, rubbing his chin. "She knew about the camera. Maybe she's been watching you longer than you think." That hit hard. For the next few days, I couldn't sleep well. I kept thinking about her final words to the camera. "See you soon." What did that mean? Would she come back? Was she alone? I replaced all the locks on the cabin and installed 2 more cameras, one hidden in a tree facing the path, the other in the kitchen. I even added a motion detector alarm. I needed to feel safe in my own space again. Then, 4 nights later, my phone buzzed at 2:13 a.m. Motion detected. I opened the app with shaking hands and checked the live camera feed. And there she was again, standing in front of the cabin. Just standing. She wasn't trying to break in this time. She was just staring at the door, like she was waiting, or thinking, or daring me to come out. But I wasn't there. I was back, in town, watching her from miles away. My heart thumped as I zoomed in. She was wearing the same pink tracksuit. She looked up at the camera again, smiled, and walked away. The sheriff reviewed this footage too. "This woman clearly knows more than she should," he said. "She's not just wandering. This is targeted." They filed an official trespassing report and agreed to keep extra patrols around the area. But that didn't calm me down much, because the next night, she left something on my porch, a letter, folded neatly in an envelope, just sitting there like an invitation. When the sheriff opened it, the note inside said, "You don't remember me, but I remember everything." No name, no date, nothing else. Who was she? I went through old photos, journals, even my high school yearbooks. Nothing. No familiar face. No clue. And yet, something about her felt oddly familiar. A memory I couldn't reach. Days turned into weeks. There were no new visits. No motion alerts. No more notes. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. I decided to go back to the cabin anyway. I had to face it. I couldn't let fear win. I parked just before sunset. Rifle slung over my back. Flashlight in my pocket. Everything seemed normal at first. No signs of break-in. No new tracks on the trail. But when I opened the door, something had changed. There was a new photo on the wall. A photo I didn't put there. It was old. Black and white. Looked like it was from the 80s. A little girl standing next to a cabin. This cabin. My cabin. And behind her, someone I recognized. My dad. My stomach dropped. I stared at the photo like it was a ghost. Who was the girl? Why was this picture here? How did she get it? And suddenly, I realized, she wasn't just some random intruder. She had a reason for coming back, and I had to find out what it was. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time the wind moved the trees outside, my eyes shot open. I kept the rifle close, but thankfully, nothing happened. Morning finally came. It was cold and quiet. I made myself a pot of strong coffee and went over the trail cam footage again to double-check what I'd seen. There she was again, clearer this time. She wasn't dressed for hiking or survival. Her clothes were too clean, and her shoes looked more like city sneakers than boots for the mountains. She didn't seem lost, just like she was snooping around. I had 100 questions and 0 answers. I geared up and stepped outside. This time I took my rifle. I wasn't hunting anymore, I was watching. Every cracked twig made me pause. Every shadow in the trees made me turn. I followed her tracks again, but they vanished deeper in the forest, off trail, almost like she didn't care where she was going. It was the opposite of what any hiker or survivalist would do. Back at the cabin, I locked everything. Then I drove down the trail toward the closest ranger station. It took nearly 2 hours to get there, and when I arrived, the ranger on duty listened patiently as I told him everything about the break-in, the trail cam footage, the scratches on the door, the girl's face, and the whisper I thought I heard. To my surprise, he nodded slowly. He said something that gave me chills. "You're not the first one to mention her." I asked what he meant. He explained that over the last year, a few off-grid campers and hunters had reported seeing someone, usually a woman, usually alone, wandering near their camps, sometimes peering through their windows, but always disappearing before anyone could speak to her. No one had reported a crime though, because nothing had ever been stolen. No violence, just odd sightings. Some wrote it off as hallucination, paranoia, even ghost stories passed around the fire, but others swore she was real, always in the woods, always near cabins, never asking for help, never speaking. I left the station more confused than ever. If she was real, what was she doing? Why was she targeting isolated cabins? And why mine? That night, I returned and checked the cabin carefully. Nothing disturbed, but the sense of unease had rooted itself deep inside me. I decided to test something. I left a small note on the table near the window. I wrote, "If you need help, say something. I'm not here to hurt you." Then I placed it beside a bottle of water and a protein bar. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I stayed up in the loft with the lights off, watching silently through the slits in the window toward the clearing. Hours passed. I heard nothing, saw nothing, but in the morning, when I crept downstairs, the water was gone, the protein bar gone, the note still there but flipped over. She had written back. It was barely legible, shaky handwriting. Just 3 words. "Don't follow me." A heart dropped. I didn't know whether to be afraid or concerned. She'd been inside the cabin again while I was awake, while I was there, and I didn't hear a sound. That terrified me more than anything else. I took the note and tucked it in my pack. I didn't want to scare her, but I needed to understand. The human in me wanted to help, to know if she was okay. The survivalist in me wanted to be cautious, to make sure this wasn't a trap. Something didn't sit right. I rechecked the trail cams. She didn't come through the front this time. She'd used the back the way I always kept locked. But somehow, it was open that morning. No signs of force. She was moving like someone who knew the woods better than I did. Someone with experience, or perhaps someone who had been out there far longer than I imagined. That day, I followed a new path. I went behind the cabin, deeper than before, past the ravine, toward the thick woods. I didn't have a plan, just instincts. I walked for over an hour, following faint disturbances. Twigs cracked, moss brushed away, a footprint here and there. Eventually, I came across something I never expected. A small lean-to, made of branches and tarps, hidden behind thick brush. No smoke, no fire, but someone had been living there. There was a tin cup, some scraps of wrappers, and a pair of gloves, hanging from a stick. I didn't touch anything. I backed away and whispered, hoping she could hear, "You don't have to be afraid. I'm not going to hurt you." But no answer came. I returned to the cabin just before dusk. My mind was spinning. Who was she? Why was she out here living like this? And most of all, why didn't she want help? That night, I didn't leave anything out. No food, no notes. I needed to see if she'd come again, even without the offering. And she did. At exactly 3:21 a.m. My trail cam snapped a picture. There she was, standing on the porch, not knocking, not moving, just looking at the door. And in the photo, something new appeared. Her face wasn't calm. It was scared, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like she had just seen something that terrified her. But she wasn't looking into the cabin. She was looking behind her into the trees. The sun had set by the time the sheriff finished collecting all the footage. Karen was sitting in the back of the patrol car, handcuffed and furious. She kept shouting that she was framed, that I had edited the videos, that I was some kind of trickster trying to get her in trouble. But her voice was drowned out by the hard evidence the trail cam had captured. Not only had it filmed her entering the cabin unlawfully, but it had also caught her stealing, damaging property, and even opening drawers that had nothing to do with her. Emergency. The sheriff thanked me for cooperating and told me the case was solid. He also warned me that Karen might try to fight it in court, but the footage was going to make it tough for any judge to believe her side of the story. Before leaving, he asked if I had any further questions. I just wanted to know one thing. Why would someone go so far over nothing? He said sometimes people think they can bend the rules in remote places. But even out here in the wild, there are lines you don't cross. The next few days were quiet. I fixed the cabin window Karen had broken, cleaned up the mess she made, and checked on all the other trail cams just to make sure nothing else had been missed. It felt strange walking through my own property, knowing someone had disrespected it so badly. She didn't just walk in, she acted like she owned it. A week later, I got a call from a local lawyer. Karen had officially filed a countersuit. She claimed I had threatened her with weapons, illegally recorded her, and tried to intimidate her. At first, I was angry this woman broke into my cabin, and now she was flipping the story. But my lawyer quickly reassured me. He had seen the footage, and it clearly showed Karen entering alone, helping herself to my supplies, and never being threatened by anyone. I wasn't even on the property. In court, Karen wore a suit and tried to act polite and calm, but every time she spoke, her story changed. The judge asked basic questions. Why didn't she call the sheriff herself if she needed help? Why did she take canned food and batteries? Why did she snoop through my bedroom drawers? Karen had no good answers. My lawyer presented the trail cam, video, and still shots from key moments. He even pointed out that I was in another part of the woods during the entire incident. After 2 hearings, the judge ruled in my favor. Karen was found guilty of trespassing and theft. She was ordered to pay for the damages and stay away from my land permanently. I didn't feel joy exactly, just relief. The whole situation had started out as a quiet hunting trip and turned into a legal nightmare. But justice had finally been done. Weeks passed. I returned to my peaceful routine tracking game, spending evenings by the fire, listening to the owls. But something had changed in me. I installed better locks, added a few more cameras, and made sure no one could ever sneak up on my property again. I started writing down everything: timestamps, camera angles, even scent markers I noticed in the woods. I had always been cautious, but now was prepared for anything. One evening, a ranger friend stopped by. He had heard the story through the sheriff's office and just wanted to make sure I was okay. Over coffee, we talked about the strange things people do when they think no one is watching. He told me stories of hikers stealing signs, campers dumping trash, and even folks pretending they were lost just to find an excuse to snoop. My story was extreme, but not unheard of. That night, I sat on the porch, trail cam memory card stacked beside me. I looked at the moon, high and quiet over the trees, and thought about how lucky I had been. If I didn't have that camera, if I hadn't saved that footage, who knows how this story would have ended. Karen might have painted herself as the victim, but thanks to a little bit of preparation and technology, the truth had come out. Eventually, I uploaded a short compilation of the trail cam footage to a hunters forum online. I blurred Karen's face for privacy, but the post got a lot of attention. Dozens of other cabin owners shared their own stories: break-ins, weird visitors, strange activity. Some had cameras, some didn't, but all of them agreed having eyes in the woods when you're away can make all the difference. I never saw Karen again, and I hope I never do. But the lesson stuck with me. Don't assume you're safe just because you're far from the city. The woods hold peace, but also risk. And sometimes, the biggest threats don't come from wild animals. They come from people who think the rules don't apply to them. So now, every time I head out on a hunting trip, I double check my cams. I make sure every tool is working, and I remind myself, the forest may be silent, but it's always watching, just like I am.